Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the CADRE Animal Health Real Estate Show. We're coming to you from the great city of Austin, Texas. I'm your host, Ron Evans. Hope everybody's having a great week. This show is brought to you, and all of our content is brought to you by our family of commercial real estate companies: CADRE Animal Health Real Estate, CADRE Construction, Kudu Realty Partners, our brokerage firm, Bluefin Design, our architecture company, and Huffman Builders, our development brand. If you like the content, you'd like to support us, please give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. If you want to reach out and talk to us about a specific project of yours, we'll put the information down below how you can reach out to us by email. So today is a follow-up to a conversation that we had in really episode 1 of this topic, and it's the budget for your next animal hospital, boarding facility, animal ER. So we're going to sit here and kind of go through line by line some of the primary categories in that budget, and not just the construction budget. So I want to make this real clear before we get too far into the conversation. You can go talk to a general contractor. We're a general contractor. CADRE Construction is a general contractor, and we build all kinds of commercial projects specializing in human and animal health. That general contractor can give you a budget for construction. And as we look down to this into these spreadsheets I'm going to put up here, you'll start to get a better understanding of what those line items look like and what a general contractor construction budget looks like. What it doesn't cover, and we'll go into this in a lot more detail, is really what I call a pro forma approach. That pro forma or developer approach goes into the details that a contractor won't pick up. So, when you buy a piece of land, you got to pay interest on that land. So there's an interest payment to be made on the land and on your construction loan during construction. We'll cover that in the pro forma. Other items like interim taxes. You own that land, you're going to get a tax bill from the county. So that's something a general contractor is not going to pick up. Normally, unless it's a design build, it will not include architecture. It won't include civil engineering. It's not include your permitting. So let's take a look now at a few of these pieces. Let's go through a budget, a pro forma, compare them, and help you get a better understanding of what these two items look like. So for clarification, we're looking at a total project cost as opposed to just a general contractor's cost. The general contractor is normally kind of in this area right here. They're giving you the cost for site improvements, shell building construction, and interior finish out. But it's really important that you're looking at all of this. So this total cost analysis is what we typically refer to as a developer cost. As developers ourselves, both for our own projects that we own, and projects that we third-party develop for our clients, we bring the skill set of being able to look at all of the things that are ultimately going to be a line item in this budget. And so it's obviously important that we look at this in its entirety and not just the cost of construction. So this is a very simplified approach. Let's look at the top down, and we're going to kind of boil this down to a total cost, an equity requirement, and a rent calculation. And at the end, I'll talk about why that rent calculation is so important. So I've just kind of used a fictitious project, Acme Animal Hospital, square footage of 5,000 square feet, purchasing 1.5 acres. And for argument's sake, let's just say that we're not going to put anything else on this land. It's going to be the animal hospital, and that's it. Now, 5,000 square feet, that's probably not the highest and best use for an acre and a half. It's very likely you would put at least another 5,000 square foot building on that. And if you want some scope or some understanding of what I'm talking about, we have a video on that. We'll reference that down below. It's really kind of making the best economic decisions for a piece of land. And often that means building more than just your clinic. You can sell off a piece of the land, you can develop and lease, you can develop, build, and sale, but it's a way to recapture that economic value that's in land that's really too big for just your clinic. But for now, we're going to assume, as we're looking at kind of a budget in its most simple form, that it's 5,000 square feet on 1.5 acres. We're going to assume you purchased the dirt for $1 million. Now we get into these numbers right here that I talked about. That's the construction cost. That's kind of what the GC is delivering, the general contractor. Site work, that's the infrastructure, everything from wet and dry utilities, so electrical, water, wastewater, your fire hydrants, uh, your parking lot, curbs and gutters, landscaping, dumpster, everything that turns a raw piece of land into a developed, ready to build site. So that is this number right here. Shell building, I've got it plugged in, and remember, let's kind of qualify a little bit of this. We're in a very inflationary period in construction right now. Central Texas is, of course, as I'm sure everyone knows, kind of leading the charge in price increases. We've got so many people moving to this area, and demand is really high. Post-COVID shortages have got us to the point where, we're seeing very inflated construction costs and longer lead times. I'm still using, though, in my analysis here, some generalities that were formed based on our recent build jobs, our recent experience, not just across all construction project types, but within animal hospitals, animal ERs. We've got probably a dozen of these types of facilities going right now. And so we've got a lot of not just historical data, legacy data, but we've got fresh data on really what it costs to build today. This could change, from month to month, and it could change dramatically based on what type of facility you choose, the specifications of your materials, how nice or how economical you want this project to be. So we're trying to use some averages right now, really more to convey the principles of a total cost budget than to tell you what an animal hospital is going to cost. That takes a lot more in-depth discussions, and it's really kind of as broad as saying how much does a house cost. That as you can imagine, that's all over the board depending on your taste and your styles. And so I'm just going to use here in this discussion some real generalities and use $700,000 for the shell building. That is defined as really the slab pour up to a dried-in building exterior. And dried-in means it's got the roof on it, it's got all the penetrations for doors and windows. It is, from the outside, it looks finished. On the inside, it's a slab underneath your feet and the underneath side of the roof. So this is where then we finish it out, the interiors. So that's everything from your flooring, paint, your drywall, your framing, all of your HVAC equipment, electrical, plumbing. It stops short of your equipment. So just be clear, this does not include your kennels, your surgical tables, any of your veterinary specific equipment, nor does it include your furnishings or any decor. But it does deliver a finished real estate property ready to move in. That's where, we do, as a general contractor, we coordinate things like all the installs of the equipment with your equipment providers. That is part of our scope. It's just not included in this $800,000. So you can see there we've got $400,000, $700,000, $800,000 for construction. Now, I've included two alternates here just for just for a study in conservative budgeting. I just threw two random alternates in: flooring upgrade of $30,000 and HVAC upgrade of $50,000. Very often when you're designing your architecture, you're designing the specifications for your project, you're making selections of light fixtures and countertops, things like flooring. Do you want to do an accent wall with paint or even maybe a tiled accent wall? You're going to have upgrades that are kind of on your wish list. We encourage, both in the planning process and the budgeting process, that you include those in your budget, because you want to borrow that money or at least have that capacity in your loan. We always say it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So I just threw a couple of random alternates in here to make that point in case. We always guide and direct our people, our clients, to make sure they do that in their budgeting process. All right, civil engineering. So the civil engineering rate relates back to the site work. They're basically the horizontal architects. You don't know what a civil engineer does. They're going to draw that set of plans that help us construct the site. As I mentioned before, things like the utilities, in Central Texas where we sit over the aquifer, we usually have to have a detention pond on site. Sometimes you get lucky and buy a site that doesn't need it on site. You save some money because you get to flow into a regional detention. But again, most sites are going to need a detention pond. The civil engineer is going to design the documents that go to the state of Texas to get that detention and that environmental approved. They're going to provide, the technical aspects of your construction, everything from grading to required parking counts. They're going to deliver that set of plans, which we have to get what's called a site permit. And I've got $60,000 plugged in for that right here. Okay. The architect then, of course, takes on the rest of the design. The architect is going to design your shell building and your interior finish out. So it's the technical instructions for constructing the building, as well as all of the materials and finishes that you select that express your design styles. So, in the front of house, you might want a really elevated level of finish for your lobby and your waiting area. You might not put near as much money in the back end, what we call back of house. That's where the magic happens, right? That's where you and your staff are taking care of pets. But you might want to upgrade that front area. So the architect is going to guide you not just through all of the construction details, the layout, the materials, the technical aspects of the design, but also those material and design finishes that meet your style. All right, I've just got a survey plugged in here. That's typically the survey. You very often might have two surveys. You might have a survey when you purchase the land, and then you'll have an as-built survey that you'll need completed once the project is finished. So this number could be a little bit higher than the $3,500 that I put in there, but I think somewhere around $5,000 would probably cover both of those. I've just put a plug number in here for interest. As everybody knows, interest rates are changing right now. This could be very different in 3 months, and it could be very, very different in 9 months. If interest rates keep going up, we're going to see a number like this 110,000 climb. If the recession that we keep being promised settles down on us, then we're going to be looking at a number that could be lower than this. Interest rates could come down. I think in this math, I'm not looking at the actual formula. I think I probably use 6.5%. That probably creates a little bit of a gulp because for so long we were talking about 4% interest rate. But I suspect everyone's been following the trends and seeing what's happened. It's still historically very competitive. It's hard to accept that right now because we got spoiled to, mortgage rates in the 2% and construction loans in the 4% ranges. And so we hear 6% and it makes us shiver. But just know that historically that's still very competitive and certainly not construction project killers. I then just threw in a kind of an interim tax line here. If you own the property, so let's say you purchase it on January 1st of 23, and your construction's completed on January 1st of 24, then you're looking at a year of interest carry or year of taxes on the land that you own. So of course you'll get a property tax bill from the county, and I think I plugged in a maybe 2.25% on this just as kind of an average. It's different by municipalities and counties, of course, but this is a pretty good estimate. I did a plug number here for some legal costs, and of course that's just your attorney reviewing all kinds of documents for you, helping you with your closing. Your geotech, that's an upfront number that is, you've probably seen these large pieces of equipment on site that bore into the soil and take a soil sample. They take that sample and they have it analyzed, and from that analysis then the structural engineer is able to figure out the kind of slab that you need and the kind of structure that we need to build. So not a terribly expensive cost. I plugged it in at $3,500, pretty good average cost, something that's done up front. And I've come up with a total project cost of about $3,259,000. Now let's talk about the equity requirement here. I just took 10% to arrive at this $325,950. There are still some lenders out there who, mostly for established practices, can provide 100% financing. Oftentimes, though, somebody wants to go with a conventional as opposed to an SBA, and most of those 100% financing models do include an SBA product. If you want to go conventional, it's normally going to be 20% or more. So again, I'm taking kind of a middle of the road approach here to arrive at this $325,950 as 10% of this total cost right here. Now, equity can be in the form of cash. Of course, that may be cash you come to closing with. It can be in the form of land, meaning let's say that you already own some land, you bought it for $500,000 and it's appraised today at $1 million. Well, right there, you're starting with $500,000 in equity. That's certainly an ideal situation. I've got several projects right now that we're developing where the equity we had in our land alone was enough for us to borrow the money for our development. This can also come in the call. This is really related to cash, but I would call this pre-development expenditures. And I'm going to hope you can read my writing here, but that's close. Looks like doctor's writing, doesn't it? So pre-development expenditures would be if you paid for this geotech out of pocket. It would be if you paid for the survey out of pocket. Some or all of the architecture and the civil engineering might be paid up front. And those are pretty significant costs. Banks will accept that. Of course, you're gonna be able to prove these expenditures through your contract with these vendors and your canceled checks. That's going to all apply to this equity piece that you need right here. There's other ways to, of course, accumulate equity, but I'm going to kind of stop at those. In a general, we've got some other videos where we talk about financing and we go into this in more detail. And I think that gives you an idea, though, that there are a variety of ways to build the equity piece that you need for your project. Now let's look at the base rent calculation. This is important because you're normally going to have let's call it a PLLC. So that's the practice. That's an entity that is going to own the practice, and the LLC is going to be the real estate. That's the entity. It may just be you. Let's try that again. I'm going to run out of writing room here. So that LLC, this could be Healthy Dogs Veterinary Clinic. And that is a legal entity that you set up with the Secretary of State, and that's the operations. This could be Amazing Vet Real Estate Developers LLC. That real estate LLC is going to own the real estate. And that PLLC is going to pay rent, just like it would if there were an outside or a third-party landlord. Of course, if you're watching this video, you probably have an interest in owning and understand some of those benefits. You're paying yourself rent, and there needs to be a real estate return on that. And so you're paying rent plus a return to yourself. All the while, you're also building equity. So it's not just that annualized return that you're going to get, and we'll get to that in a minute, which is right here. But over time, you're going to pay this real estate down, pay it off, and it's going to appreciate. So in a separate video, I'll go over a concept, what's called the IRR, the internal rate of return. That is the 6% that you're receiving yearly, paying yourself rent, plus the value of the real estate at the end of the investment hold period, say 20 years or 15 years. So that's just, again, this is between you and your CPA, you and your attorney, but you do want to set this structure up where the practice is paying the LLC, the real estate entity, rent. And you want to treat them like they're arm's length. You don't want to artificially give your practice too high of a rental rate, and you don't want to not pay a market return to that LLC. You want to act like they're arm's length transactions and set them up at market returns and market rent. I'm going to try to erase all of this because I know it's getting a little cluttered here. So let's talk about this 6%. I'm basing that on veterinary clinics that we're selling. just as a side kind of a sidebar, we also sell clinics, the real estate for our clients. Very often they sell the practice to a corporate consolidator, but they keep the real estate. The veterinarian keeps the real estate. They then look to us to help them sell that real estate to an investor. So they're monetizing their asset by selling the practice, and then they're also monetizing the asset of the real estate by selling it to an investor. We're seeing right now, anywhere from the low 5%, so let's say 5.25% cap rates or returns, to 6.25%, and all that depends on the rent that the rent that's being paid by the practice, the length of term that's left, the credit worthiness of the operations, etc. So I'm just using kind of an average number in here. I'm using 6%, and really it's a pretty simple calculation. If you take the 3.259,500 in total project cost and multiply it by 6%, that gives you an annual rental rate. So right there you can see that to make that annual rental rate into a monthly, you divide by 12, you're looking at about $16,298 a month. Now this is a triple net rental rate. So what that means is that's base rent. Base rent, of course, if you don't have any experience with this, I'll explain it briefly, and then we're gonna do some rent and some lease videos that I hope you tune in and watch as well. But if you don't know that concept, base rent means you're paying rent, but then you have the responsibility as the tenant to pay all of the other expenses associated with that piece of real estate. So for example, there's of course property taxes. Well, the property tax bill comes to the practice, the PLLC, and that practice then pays that bill to the county directly. There's insurance associated with the real estate, liability insurance, insurance on the building, insurance on the property. That gets paid by the practice. They pay for dumpster, the trash removal. They pay for landscaping. They pay for general maintenance of the real estate. Very often the things that are included are going to be the roof, the structural walls, the foundation, and the parking lot. That's typically landlord responsibility in a common triple net lease. Everything else associated with maintenance and repairs is on the tenant. So that monthly rent then basically means what we often also call base rent. All right. So that base rent is what the tenant pays to the landlord every month in rent. And then, of course, if you divide that annual number, that 195,570 by the square footage of 5,000 square feet, which was, again, I just kind of used a sample 5,000 square foot project. You can see I plugged that in up here. Then you're looking at a rental rate of about $39.11 per square foot. Now let's talk about that rental rate for just a second. If you were to go compare that to average rental rates in the marketplace, you would think that's high. The reason for that is this is turnkey, meaning these interior finishes right here are turnkey to finish this out from scratch to move-in ready. Everything is included in this. When you go find lease space and a landlord provides you with a concession, what we call like a TI allowance, tenant improvement allowance, that concession, let's say in the Austin area, might be on an average $40 a foot. All right. Well, that $40 a foot is only a small portion of what I've got plugged in here. I think I used $160 a foot here to finish to a veterinary hospital level. So you're going to then have to, as a tenant, go out and come up with that additional $120 a square foot. Typically, that's going to be a loan, unless you got the cash laying around to finish this out. So you would need to take your base rent, if you were leasing space from, say, a third-party landlord and not yourself, they would give you this $40 a foot, but you're going to have to source this $120 yourself. When you calculate what it costs you to pay for this $120 every month or every year and add it to your base rent, you're going to come up with a number much closer to or probably even higher than this $39.11 a foot. I know that's kind of a lot to cover in a short period of time. The concepts are right there, though. We are certainly happy to answer questions in more detail if you want to reach out to us. And I'll do a little bit more of a breakdown when we talk about leasing as opposed to owning. And we'll talk in more detail here in the next couple of weeks about that concept of tenant improvement allowances from a landlord. So you're basically looking at, let me see if I can zoom in and capture this whole budget just on one shot there. There you go. So you're looking at kind of the simple version of a developer's analysis of cost as opposed to just a general contractor's analysis of cost. I caution everyone when I say that because everybody seems to know a builder. And when a builder looks at something like this, they say, well, that's crazy. It won't cost me near that much to build it for you. And that's because it doesn't have all of these items in a general contractor's view of the project. You've got to have a developer look at the project. So let's wrap it up there. We're going to have some follow-up discussions on alternative financing models, on the differences in pricing if you were to say bring in a buyer for part of this 1.5 acres, sell off some of the land and reduce your cost. That's really effective in bringing this total cost down. And most of the time, you're going to find land that is going to be more than you'd need for just, say, a 5,000 square foot facility. In general, we say that would be half an acre to 0.75 of an acre. So you can imagine in 1.5 acres, there's a lot of leftover. There's economic value that you can recapture and get your cost down. And depending on your risk tolerance, there's various ways that you can capture more of the economic value out of that if you want to take on some more risk, say building a spec building and becoming a landlord. A lot of our clients want to do that now. They want to create wealth and income through real estate investments and passive income. I hope that's a educational process. Obviously, that was a fictitious project. We're walking through the basic structure of not just a construction budget, but a full development budget, what it's really going to cost you. And having construction and development in-house gives us a unique perspective and ability to put your project cost together, which is what the banker needs, right? It's what you need. You've got to account for every cost that's going to go into this project as we just walked you through in those spreadsheets. And I hope that gives you a little bit more holistic view of how we're going to put together a budget for you when you decide to build your next project. Thanks for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time. Bye-bye.